Those celebrations, Focus Features is screening the film Milk. Now, this 2008 movie was based on Harvey Milk. He was the mayor of San Francisco, who was the first openly gay public official, and unfortunately, he was murdered. You know this story. He was murdered while serving in office. Well, the Oscar-winning screenwriter of that film, Dustin Black, he joined me earlier this week to share how he's staying active in the civil rights movement. Dustin, welcome to the set of Great Day Washington.
Thank you. I love being here.
Now, you are in D.C. during Gay Pride Month to really advance rights. Tell me about your work here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my role in civil rights advancement has been as a storyteller. And I think that's a critical role. I mean, we think back on not just LGBT civil rights, but any people who are struggling for equality. What's at the core of it? Tell your story. Change a heart. You know, so often I have friends, and I know they're right, but they go after people with politics and policy and science and the Constitution. And I go, those are great points, but I don't know if you're going to change a heart. You don't change a heart, you're not going to change a mind. You want to get us moving back into in sort of a direction of progress for people. Tell a personal story. And so I try to do that with film and TV. Came here to screen Milk again, because for better or for worse, some of its messages are appropriate again and necessary again. And also in my work in this city, what was it, 5 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago now, we brought a Supreme Court case here on marriage equality. It's the same thing, man. You're telling a story, a personal story. In that case, a story that had to be told under oath in a court of law. But it's still about changing hearts.
Changing hearts. I really believe you did that with Milk. Take me back to the time when you wrote the screenplay, because this was a story that had been in the works for years, but it seemed to be going around in circles. And when it finally broke through with your screenplay.
Well, yeah, that was, thank goodness, and a credit card. I mean, I was charging a lot of it until Focus Features stepped in. And Focus Features tells these stories from like independent, individual, creative sort of voices. And I think that's a really necessary voice to share with people, right? It's about communicating our very, very unique experiences. That's how we start to understand that even though you're very different, you're from a different place, you might pray to a different God, your skin might be a different color, you might be a different gender than who you're talking to. We start to find the universal in story. And I love that Focus Features was bold enough, back in a time when we had an administration in Washington that was not in favor of marriage equality, to make a movie like Milk. And to say, hey, we'll pay you back for what you charged on your credit card, and we'll cast it, and we're going to put that film out there at that time. At that time, we were fighting for things like marriage equality. We were facing much of what Milk faced in the movie, which was a backlash to equality. And the movie is a bit of a roadmap of how you fight back in a backlash. And sadly, we're in a time right now as LGBT people, as many people of diversity, is that we're facing a backlash to equality again. And I hope Milk can be one of those stories that says, hey, the way to fight back is to join arms with your brothers and your sisters and other civil rights movements. Don't do it alone. We're stronger together. Don't just care about your own movement. Look at your neighbor and make sure they're being taken care of too. That's how you get strong. Wow,
and as a storyteller, you're screening Milk. It's still so relevant, like you said. But you won the Oscar for it, right? During that time and to now, what do you think needs to change? Because you have been this outspoken voice for so long, and Hollywood supports you.
Right.
But what happens when you leave Hollywood and you travel the rest of the country?
In the world, I live in London now. And we're seeing these issues all over the world, that there's this fear of other, there's this fear of difference that's creeping back in. And I try to confront that with curiosity. Get curious about your neighbor. Get curious about the people who live down the street. And watch out for them. Look out for them as well. I think the thing I worry about is when I was walking up those Supreme Court steps not far from here, a few years back for marriage equality, I started to worry that we were losing our strength because we were only paying attention to our own needs in the LGBTQ movement. And I hear in our marches, gay, straight, black, white, same struggle, same fight. Well, I don't see a lot of gay people at the Black Lives Matter rallies. And I don't see a lot of people who are invested in racial equality at the LGBT rallies. And we need to see that. We need to make that promise true. We need to be in the LGBTQ movement showing up for Black Lives Matter marches, for the Women's March, making sure we're there for our brothers and sisters and other civil rights movements, because together we're strong. Don't become myopic. Don't become self-centered. Don't become self-interested. You become weak and you can be defeated. And at the end of the day, you watch your neighbors' rights be taken away, their kids not treated fairly. Well, that's going to come back to haunt you. So look out for your neighbor, especially in these times when fear seems to be ruling a little bit.
Wow. Where do you gain such deep insight into society? I understand that you have some family with roots in the DC area.
Yeah, I mean, I lost my mom, but she was, you know, my mom grew up in the South. My mom grew up surrounded by racism, surrounded by homophobia, and sexism. But she was also paralyzed by polio. And I think she always felt how she was treated differently because of her difference and treated unfairly for her difference. And she didn't want anyone else to feel that way. And I think thanks to her, she instilled a sense of justice in me that I try to share now with my neighbors the way she instilled it in me. And then I think history is a guide. You know, people say, why do you make all these movies about the past? Are you just nostalgic? And I said, no way. History is a guide. It has the lessons. History is power. You study history, you can change the future. And so paying attention to those history books in school, I know kids might think it's boring, but it's going to make you stronger. It's going to make you powerful. It's going to give you a voice.
Wow, Dustin, thank you so much. You're such a prolific screenplay writer and advocate for all rights. Thanks for coming to Great Day, Washington.
Thanks for having me.